So we're going to talk about Rosh Hashanah, of course. Before that, this week's parsha, Atem Netzavim Hayom. You are standing today. Kulchem, Roshechem, Shiftechem. The Torah says you're all standing. It says all Jews are standing. Then it mentions the judges, the chief rabbis, the leaders, the poor wood choppers, the schleppers. Why is that? Before Hashem, everybody is equal. Whether you're a leader, a powerful person, wealthy or poor, a wood chopper, a garbage collector, Lifnei Hashem. Before God, we're all equal. Judaism is an equal opportunity religion, Nechama. Equal opportunity religion. So you could be a holy garbage collector, like a holy chief rabbi. In God's eyes, we're all equal, and this is a powerful message right before Rosh Hashanah. If we want to have a good din, we have to relate to every Jew, right? Yes. To who he is, not what he does, right? Right. Every person in front of God is equal. Judaism is an equal opportunity religion. Now, the Shulchan Aruch tells us, David, Leila Nishmas Chana Golda Bas Yisrael, and Tzidov and Chaim Pesach, of course. The Shulchan Aruch tells us that the shofar has to be of a ram, the kafuf. The shofar has to be a ram. Why a ram? Because the ram of Isaac. Because the Akedah took place when? On Rosh Hashanah. We'll talk about it why. But it has to be bent. Why does the shofar have to be bent? You ever wonder, Golda, why the shofar has to be bent? Bent. Well, to answer this question, we'll ask another question. David, why does the shofar have to be bent? What's the symbolism? The Mishnah says in the Sept Avot, Omdim Tzfufim. When the Jews packed into the Beis HaMikdash during the Shalosh Regalim, Rabbi Avraham, you ever rode the F train during rush hour in Brooklyn? You remember the F train in rush hour in Brooklyn? You're packed like sardines. Umishtachavim Revachim, in the Beis HaMikdash in a temple courtyard, when they stood straight up, they were packed tight, they couldn't move. Umishtachavim, but when it came down to what? Prostrate, Revachim, all of a sudden, what? There was room. Makara. Makara, makara. What's the message? The message in life is to bend. Like the shofar, to compromise. If you stand rigid, if you stand on ceremony, I'll show him, there's no room. Omdim Tfufim. But in Mishtachavim, if you bend, then there's what? Space for everybody. So you want a good din on Rosh Hashanah, people wrong you, don't stand on din. Bend like the shofar. Compromise, make way. Isn't that an incredible message? You look at the bend shofar, we have to bend ourselves. So the guy wronged me, so what? You don't stand on ceremony, exacting, demanding, judgmental. Make like the shofar. And if you bend, then God will what? Bend to you. Wow. Avi, isn't that incredible? It's called boomerang.
That's just right.
Right? Now, on Rosh Hashanah, we say Shana Tova Metuka Aleya. Shana Tova Metuka. How come Shana Tova is not enough? Reb Nochem. Shana Tova, what do you have to add Metuka? You ever wonder?
In Morocco, they say in Shabbos the same way.
Metuka. Says the Chafetz Chaim, whatever God does is good, but it's not enough. Medicine is good, but sometimes it could be bitter. Whatever God does is good, but good is not enough. It also has to be what? Metuka, sweet. Medicine is good, but sometimes, Sarah, it could be never very bitter. So we have to what? Whatever God does is latova. But we want the tov also to be what? Matok. And not chas v'sholom what? Mar. Like some medicine is bitter. Now, the shofar is the wake-up call to our soul. Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of Adam Arishon. What happened on Rosh Hashanah? When God created Adam Arishon on Rosh Hashanah, he blew Kaviyachol part of himself into what? Adam. He gave Sarah, Adam, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Literally, on Rosh Hashanah, God blew a chelik elahai of himself, kavayachol, into the human being. It's called mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So therefore, we what? Also blow into the shofar. We blow part of ourselves into the shofar to elevate the animal inside of us. The shofar comes from an animal. So God blew into us part of himself, kavayachol, to make the animal soul, the animal body more kadosh. So we infuse our animal instinct with kedusha on Rosh Hashanah. We are God's shofar, Avi. God's shofar. So he blew into us the breath of life. So we blow our breath into what? The animal shofar. Valachta b'drachav. Now, remember that movie, Come Blow Your Horn?
Yes.
They got, Shirley, everything from us.
They got it from
Come blow your horn, right? So why do we come blow our horn on Rosh Hashanah? What's it all about, the blowing a horn? And what's even stranger is that we blow 100 shofar blasts on Rosh Hashanah. Why dafka 100 shofar blasts? Because the mother of Sisera wailed 100 times. You understand that? Very bizarre. Tulsa's Rosh Hashanah quotes a very strange midrash. We blow 100 shofar blasts on Rosh Hashanah because the mother of Sisera was Arafat, right? She sobbed 100 times when she heard that Sonny Boy is what? Not coming back. So she sobbed 100 times, so therefore I have to what? Blow 100 kolot? Very, very strange. What does A got to do with B? So Rav Soloveitchik explains, hearing the piercing sound of the shofar, we must experience her emotion. Arafat's mother. She was delusional. She made excuses. Why is Sonny Boy late? He's too busy dividing up the spoils. He's too busy raping the women. That's what she said. Look at the book of Judges. But she knew that it's only an illusion. She was delusional. Right? She finally woke up and smelled the coffee. Just like her illusion was shattered when she finally had to realize that what? That Sonny Boy is not raping the women. Right? He's a head shorter. Her illusion was shattered that her son is not coming back. So says Rav Soloveitchik, the shofar shatters our illusion. We're walking around like sleepwalkers. We're like in a spiritual stupor. Right? A zombie. The shofar wakes us up, makes us face the reality that Sisera's mother faced, even though she was living in denial. Avi, we're living in denial. Right? This high-tech gadget, that high-tech gadget, this smartphone, dumb phone. It's all diversions. You shofar, your illusions are shattered. You've got to face the fact it's later than you think. No more living in denial like Sisera's mother. That's the simple explanation. Right? But of course, there's a deeper explanation. A much deeper explanation of what in the world does Sisera's mother's weeping have to do with what? With my 100 shofar blasts. Sisera is a symbol of evil, Masha. He's Arafat. On Rosh Hashanah, the Yom Hadin, here it is, David. Have in mind your mom. You're moving her up, David. On Rosh Hashanah, we coronate God and proclaim that God is the one and only absolute power. We proclaim that even Arafat and Sisera is all part of God's scheme. There couldn't be an Arafat or a Sisera if it wasn't for God. On Rosh Hashanah, when we blow the shofar, we acknowledge that God is the absolute one and only power of all. Even evil is part of God's plan. On Rosh Hashanah, we acknowledge that. So we blow the shofar, remind ourselves that Arafat's mother was weeping. Yes, there couldn't be an Arafat, there couldn't be evil without God. God tells his prophet Isaiah, chapter 45, Yotza or Borech Hoshech, I form light and I create darkness. Oseh Shalom, God says, I make peace. Uborei Ra, and I, God, create Arafat. Ani Hashem Oseh Kol Eleh, I, God, do it all. On Rosh Hashana, we acknowledge, Avraham, the good, the bad, and the ugly. They got everything from us. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Right? Rosh Hashanah, God is the good. He controls the good, he controls the bad, and even the ugly. Even a Sisera, even an Arafat, even an abomination couldn't lift a finger if God was not giving it power. So the problem is, how does do that? That's a future shiur. How does God create evil? Why he creates evil? But that we acknowledge that on the Yom Adin. Somehow even Arafat and Sisera is part of God's plan. You know, Yael, when she made Sisera head shorter, first she seduced him. What a way to go, right? First she seduced him, and then when he was tuckered out, she gave him Excedrin headache number 9. Now, she knocked him off, but first she seduced him. The Zohar says, from that sexual encounter, Yael became pregnant. She was carrying Arafat's baby. That baby was the ancestor of Rabbi Akiva. Go figure, Ray. You never know. That evil man who was seduced by Yael in order to knock him off, the chief terrorist, she became pregnant. And that child became the ancestor of the greatest sage who ever lived. You never know. God tells Isaiah, my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts, you'll never figure it out. So on Rosh Hashanah, we acknowledge, on the Yom Hadin, even Arafat and Sisera are all part of God's plan, even though we can't see it. Rosh Hashanah, we acknowledge, David, remember that movie? The good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, it's very strange. The saddest day on the Jewish calendar is Tisha B'Av. The happiest day on the Jewish calendar, says the Mishnah and Taanis, is what? Yom Kippur. Isn't it strange, Avi, that we celebrate the saddest day on the Jewish calendar the exact same way as the happiest day? David, what's it all about? Tisha B'Av, the saddest day, and Yom Kippur, the happiest day, is celebrated the same way. The 5 things that you can't do on Yom Kippur, you can't do on Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the black fast. Yom Kippur is the white fast, and yet they're celebrated identically. What's the message? Well, how does a person express great sorrow? Tears. How does a person express great joy? Tears. You put it under a microscope, you can't tell the difference. God is so magnanimous, so generous with our emotions. How come he makes us express joy and sadness the same way, David? God is very generous with emotions. We express great sorrow and great joy the same way. We celebrate Yom Kippur, the happiest day, exactly as what? What's the message? It's all one. It's all one. It's all one. Rosh Hashanah, we acknowledge that. We blow dafke 100 kolot to symbolize Arafat's mother. Very strange, Avi. It's all one. As Sarah said, the Jewish religion is summed up in one sentence. Shema Yisrael. Who are you talking to? The guy in the mirror. Hashem, what's Hashem? Midas harachamim. What's Hashem? Let the good times roll. Elokeinu. What's Elokeinu? Suffering, din, punishment. Hashem echad. That's Judaism, Avi, in one sentence. Hashem echad. It's all one. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Masha, it's all one. Now, why do we read the Akedat Yitzchak on Rosh Hashanah? Because the Akedah took place when? Surely, but that just begs the question. We read Akedat Yitzchak on Rosh Hashanah because the Akedah took place on Rosh Hashanah. But David, that just begs the question. So, Al-Pi Kabbalah, Yitzchak represents din. Avraham Avinu represents what? Chesed v'rachamim. Says the Zohar HaKadosh. What does the word Akedah mean? What does Akedah mean? Bind. Beautiful, Avraham. Tie me up. Says the Zohar HaKadosh. God says on the Yom Hadin, Avraham, the Chesed and the Rachamim should tie up and bind up Yitzchak, who symbolizes din. You hear? The Akedah, the binding. Avraham Avinu, the pillar of Chesed and Rachamim, is supposed to bind up and tie up his son, who represents what? Din. Rachamim and Chesed should bind up and control din. That's what God wants. And by blowing the shofar, we do that. We change God's Midas Hadin to what? The awesome power of a Jew. That we can change God's attribute from din to rachamim. Awesome, dude. That's pretty awesome. How do we do that? Just by come blow your horn, David. Come blow your horn. We change God's din. We tie it up, the Akedah, and change it to rachamim. Yehuda, just because we blow our horn. Very strange, right? How do we do that? Well, let's take a look. Rosh Hashanah, is it Yom Norah or Chag Simcha? Is it days of awe or is it awesome days? What is it? What is it? Days of awe or awesome days? On the one hand, we're on trial for our life. On the other hand, the Mishnah says that every person passes in front of God kibnei maron. What does kibnei maron mean? There's two interpretations in the Talmud. Single file as sheep to be judged, but kibnei maron, the Talmud also says, troops parading in front of the king. Rosh Hashanah has this dual message. On one hand, God is judging us. We're on trial for our life. On the other hand, we're parading in front of him. We are coronating him. Honor guard on Rosh Hashanah. So we have fear, trembling, mixed with what? Joy. That we have the awesome privilege to coronate God every year. So there seems to be, Sarah, a dichotomy or a paradox. Rosh Hashanah. On the one hand, we're fearful, we're trembling. On the other hand, we're joyful that we are coronating God. He waits for us to coronate him. This dichotomy, David, or paradox, is the shofar itself. The shofar, the tekiyah, is the joyous sound of coronating the King of Kings. When Queen Elizabeth became queen, didn't they blow a trumpet in front of her? So Lahav the Elef Avdolos, when we blow the kiyah, it's a joyful sound that we get to coronate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On the other hand, the truah and the shvarim, boo-hoo, is the weeping sound. So you have this paradox. The tekiyah is the joyful sound, and the shvarim truah is the weeping sound. It's a paradox. That's the symbol of life. That's life. Riding high in April, shot down in May. That's life, Masha. The shofar. Sometimes it's the kiyah, the joyful sound. But never, David, sometimes it's a shefarim teruah. You can't have one without the other. That's life. The mixture of joy and sorrow. Tears of joy, tears of sorrow, the same tears. You can't have one without the other. Yom Teruah, a day of blowing the horn. Onkelos says Yom Yabava, a day of weeping. Onkelos says a day of weeping. The problem is, if you look in the book of Nehemiah, in chapter 8, the Jews were weeping. And Nehemiah tells them, Al tifku, do not weep, because it's Yom Tif today. So how could Onkelos translate Yom Teruah, Yom Yabava, a day of weeping? On Wall Street they say, don't fight the text, don't fight the tape. And we say, don't fight the text. Onkelos, Nehemiah chapter 8 says, the Jews were weeping on Rosh Hashanah, and Nehemiah and Ezra told them, Al tifku, al tit'ablu, don't be sad and don't weep, because today is what? Despite being Yom Hadin, it's what? It's Yom Tiv. It's Yom Tiv. The Mishnah Berurah says that you're supposed to celebrate Rosh Hashanah to have meat and wine. V'samachta b'chagecha. I won't give up my day job. The Mishnah Berurah says that the mitzvah of samachta b'chagecha also applies to what, David? Rosh Hashanah. So therefore Ezra told them, go home and have good food, meat and wine, and don't cry. Because even though it's Yom Hadin, it's still what? V'samachta b'chagecha. You're supposed to say Chag Sameach on when? On Rosh Hashanah. Days of awe or awesome days? The conflicting moods of Jewish life. Fear, trepidation, mixed with what? With joy. That's what life is, David. Who knows what lurks? The human heart is so complex that a person can experience what? Joy and sorrow at the same time. Sounds bizarre, doesn't it? I'll tell you an amazing halacha, Rabbi Abraham. But first you gotta fasten your seatbelt so you'll fall off. There's an halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, brought down by the Rambam in Shulchan Aruch. A beloved parent dies, and he leaves a son $1 million. And the son weeps at the funeral. He really loved the parent. And he really cries bitter tears for the parent. And he gets $1 million inheritance. That child is supposed to make 2 brachas. He's supposed to make Dayan or Emet. And bizarre as it sounds, he's supposed to make a Shechayanu when he gets the check. David, isn't that bizarre? Elisheva, what's going on? The halacha lives in the real world. A beloved parent dies. The son loved his father or his mother or the daughter. And he cries bitter tears at the funeral. He makes a dayan emet and he tears his shirt. But then when he goes to the lawyer's office to get the check, he makes a shechiyanu. Is he being a hypocrite? No. The human heart is so complex. On the one hand, he's crying bitter tears. His beloved parent dies. But on the other hand, he has $1 million, which he didn't have yesterday. So he can go to the Ashby Yeshiva and learn now. And can quit his job. Yiddishrei. So it's not a coincidence. It's not a paradox, David. And he's not being hypocritical either. No. Strange. So, we blow the shofar, we coronate the King of Kings, we sound the shofar to announce God's kingship. That's what we do every year. God waits for me to coronate him. Now, Ezra and Nehemiah say, don't cry and don't be sad. The Ruach HaKodesh says that you should cry on Rosh Hashanah. And the Vilna Gaon says you're not supposed to cry on Rosh Hashanah because Ezra says don't cry. Don't cry for me on Rosh Hashanah. Dee-dee-da, dee-da. I won't give up my day job. So David, I'm mixed up over here. Ezra, Nehemiah, Tanakh, they say don't cry. The Riyah Kodesh says you should cry. Unkula says a day of weeping. Yom Tov, a day of weeping. And the Vilna Gaon says you're not supposed to cry because it's Yom Tov. So who's right? They're both right. You know the story. This husband and wife came to the rabbi. All my stories are true, but some didn't happen yet, David. So the rabbi, you know, they can't stand each other. So the rabbi said to the wife, "You go first, right?" So she says, "He's a no good SOB, blah blah blah, everything, you know, a no good Nick." So the rabbi says to the wife, "You're right." Then he gives the husband your turn, and he says what? The exact opposite. She's the SOB. So the rabbi says what? You're right. So the Rebbitzin, you hear this, Avram? The Rebbitzin overhears this. She says, "Rebbe, how could she be right and he be right? They say the exact opposite." So he says, "You know, you're also right." He wanted his dinner tonight. So he told the Rebbitzin, "You're also right." So how could they both be right over here, David? The Talmud tells us in Eruvin, Shammai said this, Hillel said that. A heavenly voice came out and said, "Elu v'elu divlim chayim." You're both right. How could they both be right? I'll tell you how. You have to analyze the text of Abraham. Nehemiah chapter 8. He said, "Don't be sad and don't cry, because it's Yom Tov." What type of crying is not allowed? Sad crying, crying from sorrow. Al titablu, don't mourn, don't be sad, and don't cry. So those tears are not allowed because it's Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, you can't be sad. But when Unkula says, Yom Yabava, a day of weeping, to cry from what? Joy. Don't you see, it's so sweet how Unkelos is right, Nehemiah is right, the Vilna Gaon is right, the Ari is right, and I'm right too. It's beautiful, David. You listening to me? Have in mind your beloved mother. She's moving on up. Chana Golda Bas Yisrael, moving on up. Kibbut Eim Achamei Ve'esrim. On and on, on and on. You have to have that in mind. Where was I? See, Nehemiah chapter 8 says, what type of crying is not allowed? From sorrow and mournful, because it's Yom Tov. But when Unkula says, Yom Yabava, and the Riyah Kodesh says you have to cry, tears of joy, that I have the awesome privilege to coronate the King of Kings. If that doesn't make me cry from joy, joy to the world. Abraham, you hear what I'm saying over here? It's so beautiful. When two rabbis disagree, they're speaking about different strokes for different folks. It's, yeah, what's going on over here? So you're supposed to cry on Rosh Hashana, tears of joy. But tears of sadness are not allowed because it's Yom Tov. It's Yom Tov. You're supposed to say good Yom Tov, Nechama. And you're supposed to have what? Meat and wine, if you don't have high cholesterol, right? And you're supposed to say Chag Sameach. You're supposed to say Chag Sameach because it's Yom Tov. Yes?
Isn't it ironic what we read on the Torah reading on Rosh Hashana that Ishmael, that the Sarah wanted him out of the house?
Great question. David Harrell is making his mama proud. The first day we read the Akedah because that's natural, because the Akedah took place when? So we read the Akedah, we tie up. The Chesed Rachamim of Abraham ties up Din. But the second day we read that Abraham and Sarah kicked Abu Mamzer out of the house. I mean, Yishmael, what's it got to do with the price of tea in China? Why do you read that in Rosh Hashanah for? The Chama, very strange. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, page 17, asks your question. And it answers...
It's
because
they're judged only at that moment.
Beautiful. How do we know that? Yishmael got kicked out of the house. He was dying of thirst. So the angel said, God, let him die. because his children are going to blow up your children in the pizza shop and on buses. Let him die. Why make a well appear? So God says, I judge a person ba'ashahu sham. Is he a terrorist now? Now he's not a terrorist. I only judge a person as he is now. But later, that's not. So we read that on Rosh Hashanah to give us chizuk. If God can judge a Yishmael only what he is now, not what he'll be later, so no one should feel he's a hypocrite on Rosh Hashanah. If I'm sincere on Rosh Hashanah and I really want to do the right thing and I want to be Mamlech HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all my heart and soul, God says that's all I care about. I don't care what you'll do later. Are you sincere now? Do you want to get close to me now? Do you want to coronate me now? That's all I care. Read the Parsha of Yishmael. That gives a person chizuk, David. How do you say that in English?
Strength.
Courage, not to fall into Yiyush. If I'm sincere now, that's all God looks at. Who loves you, baby? Wow. Ba'ashahu sham. And that's why you read the Parsha of Yishmael on the Yom Hadin. Now the Yom Hadin, we don't mention anything about Chet. 9 days later we say Al Chet, we say Al Chet, Al Chet. But on Rosh Hashanah, there's a total Watergate cover-up. And not only that, we censor Avinu Malkeinu. You know that? Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu L'Fanecha. We skip that on Rosh Hashanah. What's it all about? Why do we skip Avinu Malkeinu on Rosh Hashanah? Chatanu L'Fanecha. We cover up no mention of sin on Rosh Hashanah. And yet 9 days later, Al Chet, Al Chet, Al Chet. So the Zohar says, there's a pasuk in Tilim, Tikil b'chodesh shofar, blow the shofar b'keseh. B'keseh means what? Shas chodesh mitkaseh. Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Chodesh, the moon is covered up. But it's also the yontiv when sin is covered up. B'keseh means to cover up. God says on Rosh Hashanah, I don't want to hear anything about Chet. Shh. You know why? Because Rosh Hashanah, we're coronating the King of Kings. You coronated the king, and you're going to say, I sinned against you? God says, I don't want to hear it. You'll spoil the party. Shh. Coronate the king, accept God as your melech. Don't mention anything about Chet. Nothing. 9 days later, Al Chet, Al Chet, Al Chet. Because we have this dual relationship with God. Avinu Malkeinu. He's our father and our king. He's both. But there's a main difference between a father and a king. The Talmud says, if you sin against the king, ein kavod machol. You sin against the king, he cannot pardon you, he must punish you. Because a king is all about din, strict judgment. But a parent, you sin against a parent, kavod machol. So God is always parent and king to us. But on Rosh Hashanah, which role do we emphasize? The king. So king, din, justice, you can't mention Chet. It's not becoming, you'll spoil the coronation. Rosh Hashanah is Yom Hadin, John. But 9 days later, Yom Kippur is Yom HaRachamim. Av HaRachaman. If you sin against a parent, it's the parent's obligation to what? To forgive. So Yom Kippur, we emphasize the Abba role, Av HaRachaman. So we mention sin and sin and sin again. But on Rosh Hashanah, we emphasize the Melech role. Melech, I don't want to hear anything God says about what? Sin. It's not becoming to mention sin in the presence of a king. You sneezed on the truth. You hear that? Chanoch, he sneezed on the truth. This idea goes so far.
That's why the Chazan, when he sings on Rosh Hashanah, it's up and down, it's happy, it's sad.
Right. Like the shofar. Tikiyah, the joyful sound. Shvarim teruah, the mournful boo-hoo. That's life. You can't have one without the other. It's the mixture. That's the way he set up the package. Why? You asking why? I'll tell you why. Why does an apple fall down and not up? You know, Sir Isaac Newton asked that question, not a joke, Older. Sir Isaac Newton was sitting under an apple tree, it's not a joke, and a big apple hit him on the head. And he said, gee, why does the apple fall down? It could have fallen up. Avi, he said, gee, you know it's gravity? The laws of gravity. Why it has to be like that, right? But that's what it is. That's what it is. Now, on Rosh Hashanah, also happens to be Rosh Chodesh. You know that? Rosh Chodesh. Now, very strange. If Shabbat falls on Rosh Chodesh, Shabbat is much holier than Rosh Hashanah, and Shabbat is much holier than what? Rosh Chodesh. Yet, if Shabbat falls on Rosh Chodesh, you mention Rosh Chodesh. I'm not chopped liver. You mention Rosh Chodesh in the benching and in the davening. And Shabbat Rosh Chodesh, you bring Chatas Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is not canceled, even though Shabbat is much holier than what? Rosh Chodesh. And Shabbos is much holier than Rosh Hashanah. But you mention Rosh Chodesh on Shabbat, special mentioning in the Musaf, and there's a special Korban, Chatos Rosh Chodesh. Yet, every Rosh Hashanah is also Rosh Chodesh, but it's a total Watergate, David blackout. Why don't you mention Musaf Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah? There's no Chatos Rosh Chodesh on Rosh Hashanah. Why? There's an amazing Tosfot in Rosh Hashanah, page 8. Tosfot says, Chodesh miskaseh. Rosh Hashanah, God tells me, cover up Rosh Chodesh. I don't want to hear Rosh Chodesh. She'ein chatos Rosh Chodesh by Rosh Hashanah. Normally, every Rosh Chodesh should bring a chatas. Rosh Hashanah, which is Rosh Chodesh too, there is no chatat. And you don't mention Rosh Chodesh by Rosh Hashanah at all. Why? Are you sitting down for this? Remember that program, Let's Make a Deal? I'm dating myself. Masha, let's make a deal. God tells the Jewish people on Rosh Hashanah, let's make a deal. Rosh Chodesh, says the Gemara in Chulin, page 60, Rosh Chodesh is Chatas Lashem. Every Rosh Chodesh is like Yom Kippur for God. Gemara in Chulin, page 60, God says, bring a sin offering for me that I diminish the moon. So every Rosh Chodesh, there's Chatas Lashem, literally, it says a sin offering for God. What kind of sin did God do? Gemara in Chulin, page 60, God says, I diminish the moon. Therefore, every Rosh Chodesh, bring a Chatas for me. So if God diminished the moon, why should I bring a chatas? Let the moon bring a chatas. Says the great Rav Soloveitchik. What does the Talmud mean? You know, the Talmud is made up of Haggadah and Halacha. Only the halachic part of the Talmud must be taken literally. But the Haggadah part of the Talmud, that God diminished the moon and he wants a chatas, is a metaphor. Who's the moon and who's the sun? The sun is Obama and Clinton. And the UN and the EU, bold, brash, arrogant, that's the sun. Who's the moon? The Jewish people. We're surrounded by blackness It looks like every month we're about to be swallowed up by blackness.
Trump.
Right?
Trump is the moon.
The Jewish people, that's why we follow a lunar calendar. We're like the moon compared to the bold, brash, arrogant sun.
And they're both going to be here tonight.
It looks like we get swallowed up, but we're the great comeback kid. Just like the moon renews itself every month, we rejuvenate ourselves. 3 years after Auschwitz, a third of our people were destroyed. No home, no army, defense was broken. 3 years later, we build this wonderful state of Israel. It's just impossible. Not normal. The power of rejuvenation, that's the moon. It looks like it's going to be totally wiped out by blackness of evil. We keep coming back. So we are the moon. So God says, I diminished you. I make you suffer in this world. And I can't tell you why, but slicha. You hear this? Every Rosh Chodesh, God says, slicha for the Holocaust. Slicha for terrorism. Gemara Chulin, page 60. The way Rosh Soloveitchik learns it. God asks us for slicha mechila every Rosh Chodesh. Chatas l'Hashem. But on Rosh Hashana, even though it's Rosh Chodesh, God says, let's make a deal. You don't mention your sin, I won't mention mine. Let's make a deal, Elisheva. Who loves you, baby? Tosfos Hashana, page 8. The deepest secrets in the Torah are contained in Rashi and Tosfot. Rabbeinu Tam, amazing Rabbeinu Tam. So God says, don't mention Rosh Chodesh. That's my Kavayochel Chatas L'Hashem. Don't mention it. And don't mention your sin either. Mickey, let's make a deal. That's just incredible.
Before the
What?
Mashiach comes, it says the streets of Jerusalem will be packed. Well, they're going to be back tomorrow, so expect the Mashiach on Sunday.
Maybe Mashiach is coming, right? So that's the great cover-up. We cover up our sin. Kaviyachol, God says, don't mention my sin, that I diminished the moon. The moon was diminished. If the moon was the same size as the sun, literally the world couldn't exist. It's a metaphor. God diminished us through all the tzarot that He gave us. There's a plan. I can't tell you about it. But slicha. Every Rosh Chodesh, God says slicha for the Holocaust, Avi. Rosh Soloveitchik. In Chulin, page 60. What a powerful message. Right. So anyway, there's a pasuk in Koheles. I don't know why they're keeping Paris until tomorrow. The neshama has terrible anguish. If the body is not put in the ground right away, I don't understand.
The world, the body.
Koheles chapter 9, Nechama. Koheles chapter 9. Kohelet. We're going to read him on Sukkot. Says that the neshama cannot return to God until the body is put into the ground. So they think they're doing Paris a favor. It's terrible anguish for the soul.
What did they do?
They're keeping him.
Till tomorrow?
The body is lying in state.
Wait.
It's terrible anguish for the neshama.
Maybe it's punishment for the Oslo Accords.
Go there, Rabbi.
What? Don't go there. PC, it's not PC, the Chanoch, to go there, right? But anyway,
Is it true?
they're not doing him a favor. The neshama has terrible anguish. The neshama cannot return to God until the body's put in the ground. Who said that? Kohelet, chapter 9. Kohelet's part of the Bible. But some people say, David, don't confuse me with the facts.
Is it true that he was told when he was young from the
Chofetz Chaim gave him a bracha that he's going to live long.
All right. Is it also true that he died on the York side of Chofetz Chaim?
Nechama, you're amazing. He died on the Chafetz Chaim's Yotzeit.
So his
Rabbi Weber, you hear what she said?
no,
Is
that he
Chafetz Chaim gave him a bracha that is going to live long,
in his 30s, and then
and he died on the Chafetz Chaim's Yotzeit.
not only that, he did tshuva because Kodesh Baruch Hu would have never had him die
On the Yotzeit, right? So he did tshuva for Oslo.
for Oslo.
For Oslo, right?
He did it before he died. He had time. And the point is I don't think Kodesh Baruch Hu would have him on the your side at the Chafetz. I don't think he would do that so that the world, the Jews, would see that the holiest, one of the holiest is Chafetz Chaim, that he would have been buried with all the other things.
No, he died on the Chafetz Chaim's Yotzeit. They should have buried him right away, but
Exactly,
I don't know.
because they don't do it according to
halacha,
They do it according to what the world wants.
what the world wants.
That's what it is.
But it's not good for the soul.
But they don't.
I'm a soul man. No, the soul is in limbo.
So where?
According to the Zohar, the soul is like in the twilight zone and can't go back to God until the body is put in the ground.
So where were the chief rabbis?
I don't understand. Where are the chief rabbis?
Where are all the rabbis?
Why don't they protest? What are you doing to the poor soul?
Maybe they do.
I don't understand. And
24th
that's it. Chafetz Chaim's Yotzeit. No kawinky dinky that it's the Chafetz Chaim's Yotzeit.
If you tell someone they're supposed to do something in Talaka and they don't do it,
So better
you
than
get part of the sin.
that's not true. You give rebuke. You don't get part of the sin. You're supposed to rebuke and say you're not doing your father a favor, right? By
You're not going to listen,
they're not going. So better not to say anything,
but maybe.
right? Better to be a shogeg, not to be a mazid, right? You heard what the lay is saying. They're not going to listen anyway. So better don't rebuke them. This way they can say they're a shogeg.
Oh, there's some
Maybe they don't know any better.
that when the person is the head of the government, or like the king of
Yeah.
the government, that you can delay the
Who said?
I'm saying, is this a no? I don't think so.
You only wait for Kavod HaMes for children to come. Only the halach is only for children to come. Here, these children are here. There's no heter to wait for the abomination to come, or for the witch to come, or Wild Bill to come. There's no heter for that. There's no heter for that.
You know what, I was worried that they could show an open course, and I thought it's a close course.
So anyway, we should have a good gebench shiur. Sunday there's no shiur, but please, Tzom Gedalia, Wednesday, October 5, the day after Rosh Hashana, my father's Yotzeit, please come at 4 o'clock to hear about Yom Kippur, the original soul food, before KFC. That's Tzom Gedalia, Wednesday, October 5 at 4 o'clock. Minchas at 5:30, and then we have nice refreshments to break the fast. Thank you, Shana Tova, and see you next year.